Hi, my name is Nina, and I'm ready to share my testimony with you. It has been a long time coming for me to share my testimony again. I shared it many years ago, and I ended up removing that video because I felt prompted to do so and for other reasons. I'd like to give a little bit of background to how all of these things came about, my years in sin and in darkness, so that you have some understanding as to why these things happened. I just want to start off by saying that I grew up in, I guess, a normal, typical family, and my parents got divorced when I was around 2 years old. I ended up living with my dad, which, so you know, it was because of unrighteous judgment that I wasn't able to live with my mother. And so my dad brought me up, and he loved me and cared for me the best way he knew how. We went to church when I was a kid, but it was more of a go to church on Sunday, and the rest of the week is what it is. I do remember times praying with my stepmother that I had at that time, and but the Bible wasn't instilled in me. I didn't know, growing up, I didn't know or understand what it looked like to follow Jesus, what it looked like to follow him and walk with him. And so throughout the course of the years growing up with my dad, up until about 11 years old, we went to church and we prayed every once in a while. And I knew about God, I knew about Jesus, but I didn't really know them. I didn't understand who they were. I didn't understand the gospel. And so right around 11 or 12-ish years old, my dad and my former stepmother got divorced. So I went through 2 divorces, and my dad ended up meeting another woman, my current stepmother, and she took me under her wing. I wasn't too fond of it at the very beginning, but she really did take me under her wing, and she showed me what it looked like to love your husband in the way that she knew how. And she tried to teach me how to cook and all of those things. She definitely taught me how to clean. I want to say that from the time, I could really say that from the time I was about 2 years old up until I met Jesus, I felt alone. I had this looming presence or feeling of abandonment over me and loneliness. And I do believe that a lot of that has to do with not having my mother really present in my life that I believe a mother should be. And again, it wasn't her fault for not having custody of me. That was unrighteous judgment on the judge's part. But because of that, because of not having my mother, I felt alone most of my life. I felt abandoned, even though I had my dad with me and he was taking great care of me and he loved me. I didn't have that. I had a nurturing mother figure in my life, but and I'm trying to be very careful with my words here because I know that both of my stepmothers loved me, but that bond between a biological mother and her child is it's different. It's special. And so anyway, I just had that. I had that for a majority of my life until I met the Lord. And so I ended up getting married at a very young age, at around 17 years old. And there is a story behind that. That may come for another time, but I got married at 17, and then I started experimenting with alcohol. And from that marriage, which only lasted for about 2 or 2.5 years, to the next relationship that I jumped right into right after that, and the next relationship after that I jumped right into, every year the alcohol got worse and worse and worse. And I depended on that alcohol for, looking back now, I would say a means of escape. That uncertainty of life and loneliness and really not knowing who I was. I also felt like I didn't know who I was growing up. And so identity was stripped from me. Hope, I had no hope. And so from the time I was about 18 and onward until I met the Lord, alcohol was very prevalent in my life. It got to the point where I started to go to AA, and it was not only taxing physically, but mentally, and more importantly, spiritually, which I didn't recognize until later after I met the Lord. So in my last relationship before I met my current husband, I was very much looking for material wealth and happiness in the world. And so I ended up meeting this young woman who'd come to a restaurant that I was working at, and I find out where she's working. And I just thought, wow, that's so cool. You're a stripper. So I proceed to ask her, how do I get in? What do I need to do? She explains to me, the process. I said, okay, great. When can I come in? So I ended up going to this strip club, and I auditioned and I got the job. So I was in that arena for a couple of years. It wasn't a very lengthy amount of time, but it was just enough time to do the amount of damage that it did in my life. I spent 2 years with a break of 6 months in between that time, but I spent a total of 2 years wasting my life to drugs, alcohol, sex, all kinds of shenanigans, because I had no hope. Because I felt lonely, I felt abandoned, and I didn't know who I was. And the validation that I received from men and money, it made me feel good for a time. But ultimately, it was destroying me inside out. Or I could say outside in, both at the same time. I made a lot of money working there. I had several different men who were my clients or my regulars. Eventually, I met my husband. This is something that I didn't think I would share. And it's actually something that's still to this day kind of difficult to share, but it's part of my story. I met my husband there, and he pursued me. I wanted nothing to do with him because I was also in the process of wanting to get out of the current relationship that I was in. Eventually, he and I moved in together very, very quickly, just within, I think, a month of knowing each other. I continued with what I was doing, dancing. It eventually got to the point where he told me, you need to clean up your act or we can't do this together. So I tried to just distance myself from that place, and I eventually quit working there. But then what happened was it led me to an encounter with the Lord. I went back to that place after quitting because I was still hanging out with a couple of the girls that were working there. And I just wanted to go and visit them, see some of the people that I knew. I went and I saw one of the regulars that I had. I sat down with him. I had literally maybe 2 drinks, and I think what happened was I had gotten drugged, because even though I had experienced a lot of blackouts in the previous years from so much drinking, this was different. It was shortly after having just a couple of drinks, I was not myself. And so I got the bright idea to, in the state that I was in, which I was not in a condition to drive, I got the bright idea to go find my keys, which I knew where they were because I knew where the valet kept them, and go get in my car and proceed to drive home. As I was on my way there, I realized I didn't have my phone, I didn't have my purse. So I cut over the median, and I think what happened was someone probably saw what I did, and they followed me back onto the highway. So I end up going back onto the highway, and I remember stopping the car to get out, open all the doors, and see if I could find my purse and my phone. I do remember that. So I get out my car, I'm looking for my purse, I'm looking for my phone, and the police and ambulance show up at some point. I remember being on my back, and a police officer was over me, and I don't remember exactly what he was saying, what he was doing, but I do remember saying, crying out, screaming out, "Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me." I was eventually put into the ambulance, taken to the hospital, the lower part of the hospital where criminals go. They checked me out. The police were trying to get me to admit something that wasn't true, asking me if I had taken any drugs, and I know I didn't. At some point, after I had, I guess, come to and they saw that I was okay, they took me into the police van, and I was taken off to jail. And so I spent my first time ever in jail one night, thankfully. Then my boyfriend, now husband, he bailed me out the next morning. You know, I had to go through court hearings, and I had to eventually go do community service and all of those things. But during that time, I didn't know what the Lord was doing. He was obviously working in me. And looking back now, I know He was with me in so many instances, so many different situations that I had put myself in. One night I had an encounter with the Lord. The first time I had ever had an encounter with the Lord. I was sleeping, and this was sometime after I decided to stop working at this place, at the club, and I believe it was around the time that I was doing community service. I was sleeping, and I had a dream. In that dream, I was getting into a vehicle. It looked like a Jeep of some sort. And I was getting ready to go hang out with some friends and go party. As I was getting into the Jeep, I had my phone in my back pocket, and my phone started to ring. And when I looked at it, it said, "Jesus calling." Now, mind you, up to this point, I had not sought the Lord. I had not, besides the time that I said, "Jesus, help me," on the ground, I wasn't seeking the Lord. I wasn't following Him. I didn't pray, nothing. But in the dream, my phone rang, and it said, "Jesus calling." And I looked at it and I said, I don't know a Jesus. I don't know who Jesus is. And so I hung up the phone and I proceed to get into the vehicle. Again, my phone rings. It says, "Jesus calling." I hang up the phone once again. And for the third time, my phone rings and it says, "Jesus calling." And as soon as I decide to hang up my phone, instantly, I hear the most loud voice, the most holy, loving, loud father figure voice say, "Call me." And it was so loud and so, to me, felt audible. It woke me out of my sleep. But before I could even wake up, I felt when he said, "Call me," the bed shook. I could feel the bed shaking. I could feel me shaking. And I woke up out of my sleep and I just thought, what did I hear? Was that God? That was God. I know I heard his voice and I knew who it was. It was a voice I'd never heard before, but I knew that it was the Father. It was the Lord calling me to call him. And so I think it was the next morning, I called my mother, and I remember sitting on the edge of the bed telling her what happened. And I was weeping because I didn't know what to do with it. And I was beside myself as to what happened. What followed after was not an immediate change or an immediate, I'm going to follow the Lord now and I'm going to drop everything. But it was a process of the Lord continuing to draw me closer and closer to him over the course of a few years. I did have a Bible, and I never read that Bible, but I picked it up and I just started reading. I had no idea what I was reading, and so it was like reading Chinese, but I started to read it. I started to dabble in it. I, again, was still not living for the Lord. I was not living a sanctified, crucified life unto the Lord. I was still living in sin. But over the years, the Lord was really softening my heart more and more and more. I started seeking the Lord more and more and more. I still was not saved. I still had not given my life to the Lord, but I kept seeking him. And he was faithful every time. He was right there, listening. He saw what I was after. I wanted to know truth. And I kept trying, I kept seeking. I went to a couple different churches, but the Lord was calling me to something deeper. Not to say that church is wrong or anything like that, but he was calling me and drawing me to an intimate relationship with him. And so eventually my husband and I, we get married. But before we get married, for about 9 months, even though we lived together, I was celibate. We were celibate. And I explained to my husband why that was important to me, and he was very, very understanding and very gracious. And so we remained celibate for 9 months. We got married. Now, not to say that living together is right, not to say that doing what most people do these days is right. It was not right, but we did nonetheless. So we get married, and I'm still seeking the Lord. Now, eventually, and this was back in, I want to say 2019, I had gotten to the point where I was seeking the Lord even more. I know I got saved at this year, 2019-ish. I was waking up early to go spend time with the Lord, and I just told my mom, I said, I want to get baptized. I wanted to, at this point, I wanted to officially give my life to the Lord, give my heart to him and say, I'm all in, I'm yours. And so I did. I got baptized in a lake, and it was just me and my mother and the Lord, and it was the most wonderful experience. I felt new, I felt whole, I felt different. Because I'd given my life to the Lord, I'd given my heart to him. And so from that point forward, it was like the Lord was just taking me to new levels of intimacy with him. I was reading the Bible still at this point, of course, but I knew that I still didn't have something that I needed, like an infilling of the Holy Spirit, like nothing I'd ever experienced or had before. I wanted to speak in tongues, and I just wanted to go deeper. And so one morning, and this was after about a 14-day fast that the Lord had me go on, I went to the Lord early in the morning, and I had another profound encounter with the Lord. He met me there that morning, And I began to speak in tongues. And I just was repenting of so many things. So many things. Even though I had already been saved and had given my life to him, it was like he was still doing a cleansing in my heart and within me that he will continue to do in my life, until I go home to be with him or until he comes back. But there was just a cleansing happening that morning, and I began to speak in tongues for the first time, and I couldn't stop speaking in tongues, and it was amazing. And so after that point, for like the next 10 months to a year, it was me and Jesus. Like, I felt like I was on top of the world and I could do anything with him. I experienced him, and I got to know him in such a way that I never imagined. He began speaking to me in dreams even before that point, but the dreams that he was giving me became more frequent, and he was just speaking to me all the time, and he always is. But I remember that moment in that season of my life so profoundly, because intimacy with the Lord is so precious. It is so precious. That happened, and then a few devastating things happened in my life a couple years later. This may not seem like a big deal or anything, but I had a cat and a dog. I ended up having to rehome my dog. We ended up having to put our cat down due to severe kidney disease. We ended up getting a dog that we now have, and I had such a hard time accepting her, because after we got her, I just knew in my heart that it was a mistake. But the Lord had plans. Even though we probably shouldn't have gotten her, he had plans. And it was on top of not accepting our dog and the next thing that happened that I began to experience demonic oppression. Because I couldn't accept the dog that we now have at that time for about 2 years, I began to harbor anger, resentment in my heart. I began to manifest those things. I didn't know what they were, but I kept them in. I knew something was off, something was wrong, because all this time I'd been walking with the Lord, seeking the Lord, having an intimate relationship with the Lord, but now this. Now I have anger, I have wrath, I have resentment in my heart, and I couldn't really understand why. So then in 2024, my mother got diagnosed with brain cancer. Glioblastoma, which is an incurable type of brain cancer. We knew that my mother, based on what the doctors told her, that she would only have a few months to live. But based on the things that my mother had told her, we just believed that she would be healed. In May of 2024, my mother had passed away that morning to go home with the Lord. When I got the news, I was shocked. I was in disbelief because of what the Lord told her, which was that he would heal her. So I believed. My husband believed. Her husband, my stepdad, believed that she would be healed. My grandmother believed that she would be healed. At first, I took it really, really hard. I was, again, just in disbelief. And I'd asked the Lord, take this pain away. And he told me, it is through your pain that you grow. And so I held on to that, and my faith began to grow again. Because during that time, my faith was tried so hard. I mean, it really hard. But my faith began to grow again after he told me those words, and I began to really seek him and just stay close to the Lord. But the anger, the resentment, the wrath that I was still harboring in my heart about the situation with the dog that we have now, which I know doesn't seem like a big deal, but for me it was a big deal. because I believed that the Lord had something more for me, not having any pets, but we brought her in. So I still had this anger, resentment, wrath, harboring inside of me on top of the pain that I was going through of losing my mother, not losing her because she's with the Lord, but not having my mother here with me anymore. And so I went through deliverance December of 2024. It was just me and the Lord here at home. And he delivered me of so many things, all of those things. The wrath, the anger, the resentment, the unforgiveness, so many different things. And it was great. But then, because I had become disobedient over the course of about a year, doing something that he told me not to do so many times. And it was nothing, like drinking or anything like that. I had not gone back to my former way of life, but because I was consuming my life and my eyes and my ears with watching TV and entertainment and not allowing that space for him to talk to me, I was living in disobedience. And so the enemy started to oppress me again. And it was the torment of the mind was so intense. And so I knew I needed to go through deliverance again. I was experiencing and battling OCD. And so last October, I went through deliverance again. And I essentially rededicated my life to the Lord. It's kind of hard to explain. I was living for the Lord before that deliverance last October, but I just recommitted my life to the Lord, and I just said, you know what, Lord, I am all in. I'm done with the world. I'm done with the things. I don't want any of it. I just want you. And so he delivered me of OCD and other things, and I just came up a new woman again. And so yeah, I've been walking with the Lord for about 6.5 years. It has truly been a journey. I mean, really, it has been a journey. When I first got saved, I didn't know that there would be the ebbs and flows of walking with the Lord, but it truly is a journey with the Lord. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint. Many people they get radically saved. They're one way one day and the next day they're completely different. And that wasn't the case for me. It was a journey, and it was a lot of learning, and it still is a lot of learning, a lot of sanctification that is still happening in my life. Of course, differently now, but still the sanctification journey, it's a marathon. And so I'm here today to tell you that if the Lord could save me and everything that I did in my past, he can save you. And if you are feeling like there is no hope in the world, how am I ever going to get out of this situation? Who is there that I can cling to? What peace is there in the world? Then I want to say there is no peace. There is no peace in the world. And the only peace that you can receive is from Jesus. It's from the Lord. He has been my peace. He has been holding me my entire life. If you're ready to give your life to the Lord, really, really ready to give your life to Jesus, then I just want to invite you to invite him into your heart wherever you're at. I didn't get saved being in a church. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong to be in church. I'm not saying it's wrong to be in a building, but I didn't get saved being in a church. I got saved by an encounter with the Lord, just me and him at home, wherever I was. I want to invite you to invite the Lord into your heart. Ask him into your heart and really, really mean it. Repent. Repent means turn completely 180, not 360, 180. Turn away from your sins and follow him. He knows if you're serious about following him. He knows if you're serious about inviting him into your heart. Ask him into your heart. Say, I'm ready, Lord. I'm ready to follow you. If you've never given him a try, give him a try. You'll taste and see that he is good. I pray that the Lord will comfort you and that you'll see that true life, true peace, true joy is only found in him.